Yesterday we learned to solve equations using addition and subtraction. Today we're going to solve equations using multiplication and division. Anytime you're solving an equation, you want to use inverse operations. Remember, inverse means opposite of. So the opposite of multiplication is division, and the inverse of division is multiplication. So these questions ask you to give the inverse of multiplying by 5. So the inverse, we don't do anything with the 5, but the inverse of multiplication is division. So we are going to divide by 5. Here we have that division, or dividing by 3. So the inverse of division is multiplication. So we're going to multiply by 3. Multiplying by -2, we don't do anything to the -2, we just use the inverse of multiplication. So the inverse of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide by, and we keep the negative with it, right? It's not addition and subtraction, so we keep this just exactly the way it is. The opposite of multiplication is division, so we're going to divide by -2. And the same thing is true on this one. If we have divide by -3, the inverse of divide is multiply. So we're going to multiply, and we keep the -3. We don't change its sign. We change and we use the inverse of just the operation, not the inverse of the number itself. Alright, so let's take a look at what these would look like if we're actually solving equations. -4x equals 24. What that means is -4 times x equals 24. And since it was a multiplication question, the inverse of multiplying is dividing. So we're going to divide, and we're going to use the fraction bar to show our division symbol. So we're going to divide this side by -4, and just like when we were practicing with adding and subtracting, we have to keep our equation the same. So under the 24, we also show the dividing by -4. We have to show how we are solving our equation. So -4x divided by -4, these -4's cancel out. We're isolating our variable again, so we're getting the x by itself, and x is going to equal 24 divided by -4, which is -6. On this one we have 8x equals -6. That means 8 times x, so the inverse of multiplication is division, so we divide both sides by 8. So 8 divided by 8 leaves us just 1x, which is what we want, and 96 divided by 8 makes 12. We can check these. 8 times 12 does in fact make 96. Let's try a few more. 6 times x equals 12. So to solve, we divide both sides by 6. We have to show the division, and we have to show both 6's. So we get x equals 2. 3x equals -4, means 3 times x. So we divide both sides by +3. So x equals a negative divided by a positive makes a -8. On this one, our variable is on the right, but we solve it the same way. We want to isolate our variable, so since it's 3 times x, the inverse of times, or multiplying, is dividing. We show the division symbols on both sides, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. Those cancel out, leaving us just the x. And our last multiplication example, remember this doesn't mean subtract 2, it means -2 times x. So to undo multiplication, we use division, and we have to show the division on both sides of our equation because we have to keep it equal. -2x divided by 2 leaves just the x, and -30 divided by 2 is +15, not negative. So we need to get rid of that negative sign out front. It's just +15. All right, these questions are a little bit different. These start out, this fraction bar, a fraction bar means division, so we're actually starting with x divided by -3. The inverse of division is multiplication. This one looks just a little bit different because we have to multiply both of these by -3. And if we remember how our fractions work, those two we can cancel out, and that'll leave us just our x. And we have to remember, if we multiplied the left side by -3, we have to multiply the right side by -3 as well. So on the left side we have an x, and on the right side -6 times -3 makes a positive 18. On this one our variable's on the right, but it's still n divided by -2. So the inverse of divided by -2 is multiply by -2. And we show that on both sides. I used parentheses to show that I have a -2 and not a -2. So -2 times 8 is -16. And over here, if I use my fractions, these cancel out. And that leaves me just an n. Let's try just a few more. Here we have x divided by 5 equals 2. So we use the inverse and we multiply both sides by +5. These 5's are going to cancel out, leaving me just the x. And over here, 2 times 5 makes 10. Here we have x divided by 6, so the inverse of division is multiplication. And our fractions, our numerator and our denominator, are alike, so they cancel out, leaving just the 6. And 3 times 6 is 18. All right, these last few, we do the exact same thing on each one. So our -3's cancel out, leaving just an x. 3 times -3 makes -9. You can always check these by plugging them back in. So -9 divided by -3 makes +3. And let's look at one more. X divided by -4 equals -2. So the inverse of division is multiplication. And we got to multiply both sides by that -4. And our fraction pieces, our numerator of -4 and our denominator of -4 cancel out. So on the left side of the equation we have left just an x. And here we have a -2 times a -4, which makes a +8. Your assignment, you have 4 questions or 4 problems you need to do on your paper. Write down each equation and show how you solved it. If you need help, you can rewind the video and watch different parts again. But your goal is to end up with all 4 of these with the correct answer and the work shown accurately. If you'd like a challenge, you can answer questions 5 and 6. They have some fractions in there. See if you can figure out what to do with those and how you would solve those. Make sure you bring your paper with all of your work shown with you to class tomorrow.